The sharp crack of a slap shattered the hum of conversation in the reception hall. Music faltered mid-note, and in an instant, 200 heads turned in unison, drawn like magnets to the unfolding spectacle. My father's hand still hovered in the air, trembling slightly from the force of the blow he'd just delivered to my face. My cheeks stung, hot and raw, and I could already feel the swelling begin to form beneath the surface of my skin. My mother let out a soft gasp, but not the kind born from motherly concern. No, hers was the gasp of social horror, the kind that worried more about the whispers of nearby guests than the violence her daughter had just endured. "You selfish little brat!" my father growled, his breath heavy with the scent of expensive champagne. His face, flushed and rigid with fury, hovered inches from mine. "After everything we've done for you?" I raised my hand to my face, fingers brushing the place where his slap had landed. There was blood. I could taste it. A metallic tang at the corner of my mouth, the result of a split lip. The carefully applied makeup I'd spent over an hour perfecting this morning was surely smeared now, but the state of my appearance was the last thing on my mind. What preoccupied me more was the sheer absurdity of what had just happened, of how we had arrived at this moment, a public display of violence at what was supposed to be a celebration. I stood motionless, suspended in disbelief, trying to process it all. My name is Victoria Chen. I'm 29 years old, and tonight at my brother James' wedding, I was struck across the face by my own father because I refused to surrender my penthouse apartment to the newlyweds. Just moments before the slap, my mother had approached me at the dessert table. She had cornered me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "James and Anna need a proper home to start their life together," she said sweetly, her voice laced with that signature passive-aggressive tone. "Your penthouse is perfect, and it's just you living there. Be reasonable, Victoria." Reasonable. That word had been weaponized in my family for years, always used to demand my sacrifice for someone else's comfort. But this time they were asking for too much. The penthouse in question wasn't some frivolous luxury I'd lucked into. It was the product of blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights. I had earned it. I'd worked grueling 60-hour weeks for nearly 3 years straight as a software developer to afford that place. Meanwhile, James, the ever-coddled golden child, had drifted between one failed business venture after another, all funded by my parents' bottomless well of indulgence. "No," I had said, keeping my tone firm, even as my fingers trembled around the edge of my plate. "The penthouse is mine. I paid for it. I live there. James and Anna can find a place of their own." That's when my father entered the conversation, puffed up like a rooster in a cocktail-soaked rage. "This isn't a request, Victoria," he declared. "Your brother is the man of the family now. He needs a proper foundation." The man of the family. I nearly laughed aloud at that. James, who had just tanked yet another startup, a crypto scheme that imploded and took investors' money with it, was now being handed my home like a participation trophy for simply existing. And I was being labeled the difficult one, the ungrateful daughter for refusing to hand over everything I had built with my own hands. "The answer is still no," I repeated, my voice quiet but unwavering. "And if anyone brings this up again, I'm leaving." That's when it happened, the slap. Now, standing amidst a reception hall steeped in silence and stunned disbelief, I saw it all with crystalline clarity. My mother's theatrical gasp, my father's chest heaving with misplaced authority, and James, sweet, precious James, lounging at the head table with a smug little grin on his face. Even his new bride, Anna, looked satisfied, like watching me be humiliated had somehow made her night. I straightened my shoulders, squared my jaw, and looked my father in the eye. Then I smiled, not with kindness, but with promise. They'll regret this, I said, projecting each word into the heavy silence. All of you will. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, the echo of my stilettos striking the marble floor like punctuation marks in a sentence I refused to let anyone else finish. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling out, likely in a panic about what the country club members would say, but I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. My exit was deliberate, controlled. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. It wasn't until I reached my car that I finally let the tears fall. But they weren't tears of sadness. They weren't born from hurt. No, what I felt was white hot fury, righteous, overwhelming anger. For years, I had been the dependable one, the stable one, the responsible child who never asked for help, never made waves, never took more than she earned. And what was my reward? A slap to the face in front of 200 people. And for what? For protecting the life I had built from a brother who had never earned a damn thing. My phone began to buzz with messages, one after another in rapid succession. Mom, come back inside. You're embarrassing us. James, don't be dramatic, sis. We can talk about this. Anna, your brother deserves that penthouse more than you do. Dad, you will give James the keys tomorrow. This isn't a discussion. I stared at the screen, each message a fresh slap, a reminder of just how little they valued me. I powered off my phone, tossed it onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. But I didn't head home. I couldn't go back to that apartment, not right now. Instead, I drove to the one place I could think clearly, a small, cozy coffee shop tucked away on a quiet street. A second home I'd claimed during the most intense periods of my work life, the place where I'd written thousands of lines of code, drafted business plans, built dreams. The barista, Mike, glanced up as I walked in. His eyes flicked to the swelling on my cheek and the stiffness in my posture. Without a word, he started making my regular order. When he set the drink down in front of me, he raised an eyebrow. Rough day? My father slapped me at my brother's wedding, I said, surprised at how even my voice sounded. Because I wouldn't give them my penthouse. Mike blinked. The penthouse you worked 3 years of overtime to buy? I nodded, sipping my drink. Apparently my brother needs it more than I do. He's the man of the family, after all. Mike muttered something under his breath and slid a chocolate muffin across the counter. On the house? You look like you need it. I gave a tired smile and took the muffin. As I sat by the window, the orange hues of sunset reflecting off the glass, a new kind of clarity settled over me. My family had declared war. They thought they could intimidate me into surrender. They thought I'd fold, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Oh, and change the locks if it makes you feel better, I had said calmly, voice edged with quiet triumph. I've already moved everything of value to a secure storage facility. With that, I shut the door in their stunned faces, the sound of it closing reverberating in the hallway like the ending of a chapter. It wasn't until I was back in the driver's seat of my car that I finally allowed myself a breath. Shaky, but controlled. Phase 1 of my plan was officially underway. Over the following week, I maintained total radio silence. I ignored every call, every message, every attempt at contact, and predictably, their communication escalated from concerned to aggressive. James, never one to do his own dirty work, sent out what I like to call his flying monkeys. Mutual friends, extended family members, even a few ex-coworkers, all trying to guilt trip or reason with me. Anna took to social media as I knew she would. Her posts, dripping with passive-aggressive subtext, were thinly veiled barbs aimed directly at me, references to certain people who don't believe in supporting family and put possessions above love. I didn't engage. I simply observed, Let them exhaust themselves. What they didn't know, what they could never have suspected, was that I had been quietly preparing for this kind of betrayal for years. Not this exact scenario, of course. I had never imagined that my father would raise his hand to me. But deep down, I'd always known that one day they would try to take what was mine. That's why I had kept meticulous records of everything. Every paycheck I had earned, every bill I had paid, every receipt, contract, and tax form associated with my penthouse. I had installed security cameras in every room. All my locks had backup systems, digital redundancies, and unique encryption codes. Most importantly, I had leverage, and it was extensive. You see, in addition to being the dependable daughter, I had also been the family tech support for over a decade. I was the one who set up their devices, configured their email accounts, handled their cloud backups. I had access to everything, including James's business accounts, his cloud storage, and even his personal server. His secrets were no longer his own. On the 10th day of silence, my mother changed tactics. She arrived unannounced at my office, tears brimming in her eyes, her voice carefully modulated to seem vulnerable. She didn't even wait for me to offer a seat. Your father is sorry, she said, lowering herself into the chair across from my desk as if it were her rightful place. He was just upset. You know how he gets when he's worried about James. Worried about James? I didn't bother to look up from my screen, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Or worried about what James's investors will do when they find out where their money actually went. Her breath caught and the silence between us turned taut. I don't know what you mean, she said finally, her tone cautious. I turned to face her fully. So, you're saying you don't know about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the consulting fees James paid to Dad's business under fake invoices? Her face blanched, the color drained like a tide receding. How how did you? I'm very good at what I do, Mom, I replied smoothly. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when James repurposed parts of my old code in his fraudulent crypto platform? You all thought I was too busy or too naive, but I've been watching. It wasn't a scam, she whispered, clinging to denial. He just made some mistakes. Mistakes? I scoffed. Fraud isn't a mistake, it's a felony. I swiveled my laptop around, revealing a digital dossier that had taken months to compile, a spreadsheet of bank transfers, copied contracts, code comparisons, and email threads. Her hands trembled as she leaned closer to read. What do you want? She asked finally, voice brittle. I want peace, I said plainly. No more demands, no more manipulation through relatives, no more cryptic posts or backhanded shaming. The penthouse is mine. This conversation is over. And if we don't stop. I gave her the same smile I had worn the night of the wedding. Cold, controlled, unshakable. Then these files go to the SEC, along with the footage of Dad assaulting me. I imagine the investors would be very interested in how their money was laundered through fake tech projects and family consulting gigs. You're destroying your own family, she said, her voice breaking. No, I corrected. That happened when you demanded I hand over my home, when Dad struck me, and when James smirked like he'd won. I turned the laptop back around. I'm done being the family's doormat. She left without another word, but I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. They were cornered now, wounded, dangerous. But I still held one final trump card. That evening, my real estate agent called with news I'd been waiting for. The oceanfront property, a sleek high-end apartment complex I had been eyeing for months, was officially mine. The same building James and Anna had been dreaming of renting in I logged into my private GitHub repository and uploaded the final version of the software I'd been building on the side, a comprehensive property management platform. Ironically, it was the same concept James had tried to steal from me for his doomed startup. My phone buzzed, a text from James. James, Mom told me what you're doing. You can't prove anything. I smiled and sent him a single screenshot, a server log from his private database showing dates and code commits copied directly from my repo. His next message arrived within minutes. James, what do you want? Me. Distance. Total and complete. No contact, no family obligations. My life and my home are no longer on the table. And James, and if I refuse? Then I own your dream building. I have proof of your fraud, and enough to bury both you and Dad. Your move. The typing indicator blinked in and out several times before his reply came. James, you've changed. Me? No, I just stopped pretending to be who you wanted me to be. I silenced my phone and walked out onto the balcony of my penthouse. The city stretched out before me, twinkling under a sunset sky. For the first time in years, I felt light, free. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's liberation. I always was, I replied evenly. You just never noticed. He exhaled then, a long, weary sound that seemed to deflate him. Leaning against the doorframe, his posture slumped. He looked nothing like the man who once wielded control with just a raised eyebrow. Your mother misses you, he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. We all do. No, I corrected him, firm but calm. You miss having someone to control, someone to give up everything to make James look good. That person's gone. She doesn't exist anymore. He looked pained, his voice barely above a whisper. I was wrong. About all of it. The slap, the demands, shielding James. I've lost everything because of it. He wasn't wrong after I made it clear what I had on him, the financial records, the evidence of fraud, the video of him slapping me in public. He had no choice but to resign from his board position. His name, once revered in business circles, had become a cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. I had never even sent the files to the authorities. I didn't have to. The mere possibility was enough. You haven't lost everything, I said, eyes steady. You still have James. Isn't that what's always mattered? He flinched as if I'd struck him. Victoria, please. We're family. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, but one born from clarity. Family? Real family doesn't demand you give up your home, doesn't slap you in front of 200 strangers, doesn't sit back and smirk while watching it happen. Each word hit harder than the last. He winced at every truth I laid bare. But I wasn't done yet. You know what I realized after the wedding? I asked. I've never needed any of you. Every success I've had, every step forward wasn't because of you. It was in spite of you. I know, he whispered. I know that now. I studied him. This man who had loomed so large in my childhood. His authority absolute. His approval a prize, always just out of reach. And now? He looked so small. Your 5 minutes are up, I said, beginning to close the door. Wait. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a white envelope. Your mother wanted you to have this. It's an invitation. Her birthday dinner next week. She would really like you to come. I took it without opening it, letting the envelope rest in my palm. I'll think about it. That night, I sat on my balcony, the envelope in my hands, turning it over and over as the city lights shimmered around me. Part of me wanted to toss it straight into the trash, symbolic, final. But another part, the part that had grown stronger through all of this, knew that true power didn't come from severing ties completely. It came from choosing how and when to connect, on my terms. The following week, I attended the birthday dinner. I arrived late and left early. I spoke little, but I saw everything. James and Anna sat stiffly, their former radiance dimmed. Designer outfits had given way to budget friendly substitutes. My father remained sober, speaking cautiously, measuring every word. My mother wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, brittle and overbright. They were walking on eggshells, not because they feared punishment, but because they knew they could no longer manipulate me. They understood that I had become someone they couldn't control, someone they had to respect or lose entirely. In the months that followed, a new normal emerged. My boundaries were no longer suggestions, they were laws. James and Anna got jobs, modest ones, but jobs nonetheless. They moved into an apartment they could actually afford, far removed from the penthouse dreams they once tried to steal. My father remained in my life, but distantly. Emails about business opportunities, forwarded articles he thought I'd find interesting, all polite, never personal. My mother clung to hope longer, always trying to rebuild the version of me she wanted. But over time, even she adjusted, realizing that I was never going to be the daughter she had tried to mold. One year after the wedding, I hosted a dinner in my penthouse, not for my family, but for the people who had truly stood by me. Mike from the coffee shop, who had unknowingly handed me strength one cup of coffee at a time. My real estate agent, who had helped me acquire not just a property, but a symbol of independence. My lawyer, who had shielded me like armor from the legal and emotional storms. Um, we ate together on the balcony, the sunset casting golden light over the skyline. Laughter flowed, no tension, no unspoken expectations, just peace. To Victoria, Mike said, lifting his glass, who turned a slap into an empire. I smiled not just because it was clever, but because it was true. That single shameful moment had set off a chain of events that reshaped my life. I had found not just financial freedom, but emotional clarity. I had defined my worth and demanded it be honored. I'd learned that revenge didn't have to be cruel. Sometimes the best kind of revenge is living well, building a life so full, so fulfilling that those who tried to break you are forced to watch you thrive. And sometimes the most valuable family isn't the one you're born into, it's the one you choose, the one that chooses you back. I raised my glass in return, finally, completely at peace. They had tried to take my home, but instead they gave me my freedom, and that was worth more than any penthouse.